Generally speaking, if the same crop is sown in a field of, okay, if the same crop is sown in a field for several successive years, growth in the later years is poorer than growth in the earlier years. Okay, so if the same crop is put back into the field for several successive years, then it grows poorly than it would in earlier years. Okay, since nitrogen in the soil becomes depleted. Even though alfalfa is a nitrogen fixing plant and thus increases the amount of nitrogen in the soil, surprisingly, it too, if planted in the same field year after year, grows less well in the later years than it does in the earlier years. Okay, so I would assume, I'm thinking that maybe the alfalfa plant's ability to be this nitrogen fixing plant kind of decreases or kind of is affected by being planted in the same field year after year. It's kind of getting used up or something. I don't know.
Oh, okay. So when I read this, I'm like, okay, so if we keep putting the same field, if we keep putting the same crop in a field, then there's going to be like we depleted of his nitrogen. And then,
Yeah.
Yeah, even though
So
alfalfa
it gets used up and
alfalfa puts nitrogen back into the field. I'm like, interesting. But if planted in the same field year after year, it grows less well in later years. So like, okay, so which of the following, if true, most helps to explain the similarity described above between alfalfa and non-nitrogen fixing plants? So this is a paradox question. It's kind of worded funny. But
yeah.
what is our paradox here?
Okay. Most helps, yeah. But it says the similarity instead of the discrepancy or.
Well, it's like why, yeah, which it's most helps to explain. Well, what is the similarity? The similarity is that it grows less well in later years. So it's like, why does alfalfa
Which is
grow
a plant
less
that
in
can,
later years, even though
yeah.
it's a nitrogen fixing plant?
Okay, so let's see. All right, A says some kinds of plants grow more rapidly and are more
Wait,
productive.
wait. You have to predict it. Why might it be?
I think because it's so about alfalfa and non-nitrogen fixing plants, the similarity is that it's getting planted over and over again.
Right. Okay. So what might be the reason though that even though the alfalfa is putting nitrogen back into the soil, why is it growing less later years when it's like repeated over and over again? Why might it be?
Because it probably cannot infinitely put nitrogen back, or
what is this argument assuming? Like if we assumed that you could plant nitrogen putting back like nitrogen fixing plants over and over again and never have problems, what are you assuming?
That it's going to stay healthy forever.
Or that the only thing you need is nitrogen, right? Couldn't nitrogen fixing plants just be taking a different nutrient from it?
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
Assuming that all you need is nitrogen. If you have nitrogen, they all can grow.
They can all grow, right? Okay, yeah, I see that.
Well, maybe like I don't know, phosphorus, or I don't know what calcium. I don't know what like there is plants, but
yeah.
Couldn't it grow less well because the nitrogen fixing plant is taking something else from the soil?
Yes.
Or maybe
so it's getting affected by something else.
Maybe it puts too much in that it makes it toxic.
Yeah.
Like it's like way too much. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true.
These are all my predictions, but let's go in and start with A.
Okay. So A says some kinds of plants grow more rapidly and are more productive when they are growing among other kinds of plants rather than being grown in only among plants of their own kind. I don't think that's
at least one, and that doesn't explain why they're not growing well, because we don't know if these alfalfa are growing against only their own kind or others.
Right? We don't know that. Okay. B says alfalfa increases the amount of nitrogen in the soil by taking nitrogen from the air and then releasing it from that. in a form that is usable by most kinds of plants? No, we don't know if it's increasing by taking it from a different source and releasing it. I would not be inclined to that.
I agree.
Okay. C says certain types of plants, including alfalfa, produce substances that accumulate in the soil and are toxic to plants that produce those substances. So which of the following is true? The similarity described helps explain the similarity. Okay, so that says that
So essentially right here, we can just say alfalfa, right? Like we don't care about these.
Yeah, that's where I'm trying to start. Yeah, alfalfa produce substances that accumulate in the soil and that are toxic to the plants that produce those substances, so they grow less in the later years. Okay, I can keep that one.
We're saying here that alfalfa produces substances that accumulate in the soil.
Yeah.
And these substances are toxic to the plants that produce them. What is the plants that produce those substances?
But that's just alfalfa. Right? Yeah.
Alfalfa produces substances that accumulate in the soil and are toxic to alfalfa.
Yeah, so we're talking about
a prediction where we said maybe.
So it's not talking about the other plants, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, other plants it would work for too, but it's also true of alfalfa. It's saying like alfalfa creates something that is also toxic to alfalfa.
Okay, but we're looking for the similarity from.
Well, no, it's a paradoxic. So this is a weird question. Ignore the similarity described. The similarity described is why do they grow less well in later years?
So we're just talking about alfalfa. We're just trying to answer this about alfalfa.
Pretty much. It's like why, like we're trying to explain why does alfalfa not grow well less in later years?
Okay, so that makes sense then. C would make sense.
All right, what about D?
D says alfalfa increases nitrogen in the soil in which it grows only if a certain type of soil bacteria is present in the soil. But that doesn't explain why it doesn't grow well in later years.
Right. It's like what if it has that in the soil?
Yeah.
Why isn't it growing well?
I don't know how that would differentiate earlier years from later years.
I agree.
Okay. E says alfalfa is very sensitive to juglone, a compound that is exuded from the leaves of black
I'm just laughing at this answer.
walnut trees. What the heck?
I'm like, cool, but do we know if they near us? I'm like, whatever, bad answer. That's why her answer.
Yeah, I think C is the best choice.